Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon over a lunch period. I hope the sun is shining where you are. It is absolutely glorious shining here, and I hope you all had a good weekend and have managed to enjoy some good weather. So my name is Tim McEwan, and I'm the Managing Director of Essex Leadership. And welcome to our Leadership Week, the first session on our Leadership Week. It's great to have you. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping, if that's all right. First of all, if it's okay with you, we're going to record this session because we want to just try to keep a record of what it is that we've done. And also for anybody internally that would like to watch it, there's an opportunity for them to do that. And otherwise, feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat function. We all know how this works. We've been doing it for well over a year now. So any chats, any comments, any thoughts, please feel free to record them in the comments. And indeed, if you want to ask me anything or stick your hand up, then please do just press that hand up button, and I'll come to you and we'll have a bit of a chat about whatever it is that's on your minds. So what I'm wanting to do this afternoon, because this is our opening and introductory session for Essex Leadership Week, is I want to do two things. First of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the week that we've got coming up, and also a little bit more about Essex Leadership. And I'm conscious we've got a really mixed audience here of people from all sorts of industries, all sorts of positions within those industries. And so a really good opportunity for us to open up and share with you everything that we do. And the second part of this session this morning, or this afternoon rather, is to hear a little bit from you, because I think that we are coming up to what I'm describing as a moment that matters. And that moment is around the 21st of June. And it is when this so-called world that we've been in for the last 15 months by that point, will kind of come to an end, apparently, and apparently COVID won't be a thing anymore, and we should all just go back to where we were. Now, regardless of your take on that, I think it's a moment that matters, and I think it's a moment where organizations have been for a long time now working in this remote way, and as someone said to me the other day, we were judged on the way out. We were judged on how well we managed that transition into remote working, how well we supported our people, but we're going to be judged on the way back again. And I think that's an important point to remember and to consider. So I'd like the second part of this discussion to be hearing from you about what it is that you're thinking of doing in terms of bringing people back, but not just from the technical point of view. What are our concerns around the impact on our organizational culture? And more broadly with our people. So I think I'd like to turn that into a bit of a discussion towards the end of the session. But let me just quickly introduce myself. A number of you know me, a number of you don't know me, so let me just try to level the playing field here a little bit. My name is Tim McEwan, as I've mentioned, and I've been with Sheffield Haworth now for 10 months. I joined in June last year, so I am a lockdown starter. Which is a really interesting journey to go on. By way of background, I started my career in the British Army. I did 10 years in the Army, started my career at the Military Academy at Sandhurst, where I commissioned, and then I finished my career back at Sandhurst 10 years later as, in essence, a leadership instructor. So I'm back on the staff at Sandhurst. That was a great place to finish your military career, and it gave me what I describe as the development bug. I absolutely loved bringing on these young individuals and seeing them over a year turn into young men and women who are going to be able to put themselves into very difficult situations quite quickly, maybe even only months after graduating, commissioning from Sandhurst, where they would have to lead men and women, maybe 10, 20, 30 people in difficult circumstances and make decisions. And that's the big thing, is that making decisions. And it was a joy to see them transition from what they were when they arrived into these enormously confident young people. And I say young people, they're around the sort of 22, 23, 24, perhaps average age, when they commission, who are able to go and make those big decisions. And so developing leaders became a real thing for me. I loved it. I jumped out of the army. I went into leadership consultancy because I knew that was the area that I wanted to spend the rest of my career in. So I worked in the consultancy for about 5 years before I then went in-house to Henderson Global Investors as their global head of leadership and learning, which is a great job, great place, a great firm. And I did that for a number of years. In 2015, I was appointed as a fellow in management practice at the University of Cambridge's Judge Business School, where I still am involved on an ad hoc basis, and an honorary sort of basis, where I teach on executive education programs around high-performing teams and organizational cultures. And then last year, as I say, I joined Sheffield Haworth, and it's really great to be here. What is SH Leadership? Well, let me just again share a little bit about that with you. SH Leadership is part of Sheffield Haworth. Sheffield Haworth is a people and transformational consultancy, and in our DNA is ultimately people. As you will all know of Sheffield Haworth from various guises, but of course we have been an executive search firm for many years, and we have evolved into this multi-service business, a multi-service consultancy, which clearly involves and includes and has never forgotten executive search, but we're now able to offer other service lines as well. So our pillars, if you like, are executive search, very firmly the foundation of the firm, but also leadership and talent through SH Leadership, and also we're able to support with transformational change consultancy through SH Consulting. So we're able to involve the broad spectrum of people and transformational change. Before I sort of tell you actually what SH Leadership does, it's probably worth just starting with why it is that we do it. And preparing this, I was really looking forward to thinking through more clearly for myself, why is it that we do things? It's nice to be able to pause and reflect on these things. And I think it is because I and we, the wider team, truly believe in potential. I hope you all believe in potential as well. I hope you wouldn't be here if you didn't believe in potential, but also you will have seen your own potential at certain points of your career flourish. And whether or not that is because you've had a mentor or someone guide you and nudge you to allow that potential to come through, or maybe it's just happened organically, or maybe there's still potential latent in you that can be brought to the fore still. But whatever the case, often we need a little bit of help to fully recognize some of that potential. And so really we exist to help people and organizations to realize that potential, which I think is really exciting. I get a physical reaction when I've delivered I don't know, a workshop, or I've coached someone, or I've helped someone, and they come back even immediately after the session, or maybe a couple of weeks later, and they say, Tim, that was really good, and you know what, I used it and it worked, or we've had another conversation and something's improved, or whatever it might be. I get it now. I get this tingling sensation down my spine. Think, wow, that's really brilliant. And clearly, there's a commercial business as well, but I do it for free. I know, Tim, I can't do it entirely for free, but I would do it for free because I just love that sensation. So this week, what is this week all about? Well, this week is not just about slides, okay? I've got a great lineup of sessions and speakers all happening at lunchtime over the week. But it's not just about clicking through slides. It's really about providing for you some insights, a little bit of perhaps inspiration, a little bit of food for thought. It's not just about clicking through slides. There'll be a session which will hopefully address a number of different issues, and you will be interested in some of them, and some of them will not be of interest to you. So please feel free to pick and choose the ones that are most relevant to you. And Fran, I think, has put into the chat a link to all the various sessions, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about them as well. But first of all, let me tell you the four core pillars of SH leadership and how we might be able to support our clients and our wider search business as well. Our four pillars are quite simply assessment, coaching, leadership development, and culture support. Assessment, so I'll go through each of them in turn. Assessment, I suspect you will all know quite well. You'll have either used it for your organization, or you will yourself have been through some sort of an assessment process. Assessment can be an emotional word. I think people can have an emotional reaction to being asked or told that they're going to need to take part in some form of assessment. And therefore, maybe we'd be better off calling it an opportunity to profile or an opportunity to evaluate, but whatever the case, there's going to be an emotional reaction. Those emotional reactions are usually tied to some significant decision that is anchored to the assessment, be it assessment for selection, or maybe we're doing some sort of reorganization, but nonetheless, people are nervous about it. I hope that one can turn assessment into a very positive experience for people, regardless of whether or not it's someone going for a particular role, or whether or not it's an organizational redesign or whatever it might be. It is a really exciting opportunity for the participants, so the person who is on the receiving end of this experience, to learn about themselves. We should all be seeking the opportunities to learn about ourselves. And so that's what our evaluation, our profiling, our assessment services can provide. Clearly, it's often very closely aligned with the search process. And when we make decisions about hires, we want to have as much data to be able to hang our hat on and ensure that the candidate that we ultimately select is the best possible fit, but also is going to have the best possible opportunity to assimilate themselves into the new organization that they're coming into. And the sort of data that assessment can provide is enormously helpful in that process. So it's about giving us data, but that could also help us in talent decisions, in private equity, when we do our due diligence on leadership teams and management teams that we have. Maybe it's a new chief exec or a team leader that's come in and wants to understand just exactly what they're coming into, what they've got under the bonnet. So assessment can be enormously helpful. On Wednesday, on our Wednesday session, Gail Pritchard, Gail is our head of assessment. Gail is going to host a panel session exploring, in this case, exploring a little bit around assessment within the selection context. And we've entitled it, We Say We Want Different, but we end up with the same. And I think that's quite interesting, because I think when anyone starts some things, they start a search in particular, they're looking for something new, they're perhaps looking for a bit of challenge, whatever it might be, and quite excited about the art of the possible. And then through various processes, or either perhaps through a lack of organizational confidence, we end up going with what it is that we know. And maybe we lose an opportunity there. So Gail is going to host a panel session on that. One of our speakers is a specialist in looking at diversity in the assessment process. And I think that's another important angle. It's so topical, but so important. It's not just sort of in the zeitgeist at the moment, but it is an important subject. And diversity, I think, forms a golden thread through everything we do. Richard Wilmot, who's I'll talk about next, who's our head of coaching, talks about golden threads that need to run through everything we do. And diversity is one of those golden threads, without a shadow of a doubt. Let me bring you on now to that piece around coaching, which is our second pillar. When I arrived, it was terrific to meet a gentleman called Peter Bidette, who I think's on the call today. Peter is an absolutely terrific coach, and has got a long and a really, really robust track record in the coaching that he's done. And Peter has been and continues to work with Sheffield Haworth as a coach, and before I arrived, started to build out our coaching business. So it's been a real privilege and pleasure to be able to build on that foundation that Peter laid down. And at the beginning of the year, Richard Wilmot joined Sheffield Haworth as our head of coaching, and continues to work with Peter, and which is a real privilege for us. Coaching, some of you may know about coaching, some of you may have been coached, some of you may engage coaches for other people. But some things that are happening in the coaching world is, first of all, it's being enormously professionalized. When coaching started out as a profession, if that's what you'd like to call it, at that stage, it really was anyone could give themselves a badge as a coach because they like people, or they've helped a friend with a problem, and they call themselves a coach. But actually, there is a huge amount of psychology that sits behind it. And if you're going to coach people, you need to be prepared to potentially open up a bit of a can. I should have said can of worms. That's a bit unfair because it's not as a can of worms, but you're opening something up, and you have to therefore be able to understand how to close it again, or at least how to support that individual with the things that you've opened up and surfaced. So coaching is becoming much, much more professionalized. It started that journey with the Association of Executive Coaches, which Peter actually was one of the founding members of. And nowadays, people are expecting coaches to have professional qualifications. The second thing, of course, is that coaching is becoming much more democratized. It used to be the preserve of the C-suite and the senior people. And rightly, there is still a great deal of coaching that goes on at that level. But there's also much more coaching throughout the organization. There's bits of coaching tech that are being used at more junior levels for more cost-effective coaching. And of course, the senior team still do engage in coaching because the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, the decisions that they need to make, they value having someone to be able to sound off against, and just to make sure that they're checking their decision making and working out what biases, perhaps unconscious biases, are causing those decisions to be made. So there's two big things happening in the coaching world. But what we're able to do is support people all the way through the career life cycle, and also specialize in some particular areas. So we're particularly hot on supporting people through investment coaching and investment decision making, and also through a program that Peter's developed specifically around traders and supporting traders in their development and their coaching journey. I probably haven't done those two technical bits of coaching justice because there's a huge amount of science that sits behind it, and Peter and Richard are the specialists in that. On Thursday at 1 o'clock, Richard will be joined by Holly Sedlacek. Holly is head of coaching at Janus Henderson, and they're going to be talking about their take on coaching, a little bit around where they see the future of coaching going, and also a little bit around what they've noticed in COVID from a point of view of coaching, and as we come out of COVID, the role that coaching can play to support people in that return to whatever we're going to talk about later on, whatever the new normal looks like. Our two final pillars are leadership and culture. Leadership for us is all about taking either formed groups of individuals, high potential talents, whatever it might be, and working with them to bring out the potential in them through some form of leadership development program. It's also about working with formed leadership teams where we can help them develop themselves as a team. Particularly, again, coming back out of COVID, I think that's particularly important. So that's our leadership space, and our culture offering is about helping organizations to understand what their culture perhaps is at the moment and perhaps needs to be in future. So it's a little bit about diagnosing, it's a little bit about supporting and advising. Importantly, with culture, we can't change your culture for you. Unfortunately, that it can only be down to the given organization, but we can help you and support you in the journey. But we have two sessions around leadership and culture, which I see very much as going hand in hand. Tuesday, tomorrow, lunchtime at 1 o'clock, we have Roderick Yap. Roderick is going to talk to us about the whole idea of leadership, and is going to entitle a session entitled "The Balanced Leader," because we believe that leadership is an art. It is the art of balance. It is the art of adapting ourselves to varying contexts, often within 5 minutes of one another, because nothing stands still. And therefore, this ability to adapt ourselves to different environments and different situations is really important. Rod and I have been talking for a number of years, and we don't really like the sort of the recipe approach to leadership, because the recipe implies that there's a certain amount of knowledge, you follow the recipe and you get a given outcome. Well, we're much more about principles approach, a principled approach to the development of leaders, the principled approach to the execution of leadership. And also, interestingly, it's worth noting that on our leadership development programs, one of the things I feel is really, really important is to help people to develop their own personal leadership philosophy. Because I don't think very many people pause and take any time to think about what their personal leadership philosophy is. So that's what we want to try to give people the space to do, work out their personal leadership philosophy. And then on Friday at 2 p.m. this time, on Friday at 2 p.m., we are really lucky to be joined by two of our senior advisors, Kim Matalon and Paul Nansen. Kim has recently finished as the Global Head of Learning, Leadership, Talent and Culture for Barclays International. Now, you have a huge role, and she's enormously well respected across the whole industry, and very experienced individual. And so we're looking forward to hearing from her. But we'll also be hearing from Paul Nansen, or should I say Major General Paul Nansen. Paul, until recently, was the Director of Army Leadership and was also the Commandant of the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. And Paul has led in theatres all the way from when he was 22, one of the 22-year-olds I was mentioning earlier on, leading the Army straight into it, all the way through brigade division and every theatre that the British Army has operated in for the last 30 years, culminating in that role as Director Army Leadership and Commandant at Sandhurst. So with Paul and Kim, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation. We're going to talk about leadership in crisis. We're going to talk about where we have seen people stepping up to the plate over the last 18 months, 15 months perhaps, during COVID. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how we can see people resetting themselves as we come back into post-crisis period. So we've got a really full week of activity. Fran has put the link in the chat to where we might go. So that's the week ahead. What I'd like though now, and I mentioned, and I guess I warn you all, what I'd like to do is to open up the discussion a little bit, and I'd like to hear from some of you about what some of your concerns are in bringing people back to the office. Because I mentioned earlier on that this is what I think is a moment that matters. We get judged, we were judged on the way out, we'll be judged on the way back in again. And I don't think it's as simple as saying, right, everybody back in, turn the lights on, off we go. Because people have had extraordinary experiences over the last 15 months. Some of us will be the, I heard a phrase the other day, I think it was along the lines of the guilty happy, or whatever it might be, or quite happy with how it's gone on and feel quite guilty about it because they've had an all right time of it. Other people have had truly awful times. And just because they've had an awful time doesn't necessarily mean that they're itching to get back into the office. So I'd love to hear from anybody out there what they are thinking, what they're concerned about in terms of their people and their culture, importantly. So it's not just a case of we're going to make sure that the workplace is safe. Well, of course, I'm thinking, well, what cultural impact does it have for us? And what are you worried about in terms of getting the machine back up and running and getting going again? So maybe I could throw that open to the floor and see if anyone might consider chipping in. It's always dangerous, isn't it? Because I go silent now and hope that someone says something. Alex, you've come off mute. Does that mean you're going to talk?
I'm happy to go ahead if you want.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
All right. So hi everyone. I'm Enrique. I work at a technology company based in Barcelona. We have over 1,000 employees, and we've been working remote ever since March of last year. So meaning, I haven't been a single day to the office since then. And what I find interesting now when we're having discussions about how we're going to go back is that I realize that, a lot of our employees are software developers. And I say this because I think it's particularly more the case with them, but I really feel there are some people that are just not going to want to go back to the office. They are very happy at home. They find that they're being very efficient. And, you were talking about what are your concerns? One of my concerns is that, if we force people to come back, that there are some people that are going to just go and look for jobs elsewhere because they're just happy with the current setup. And I know that there are companies out there, and some of them big companies in Silicon Valley that have just said that they're going to be remote forever. So I think, I really find that this, like you said, now we were just on how we came out of the office, going back. It's a pretty big deal. So yeah, there are concerns.
Yeah, and do you have any? I mean, do you have any thoughts at the moment about how you're addressing them, or what are some of the things that you're thinking about?
Yeah, so I think the obvious idea is trying out some sort of like flexible 3 and 2 or 4 and 1. Some form of maintaining part of the remote that allows people to still have that, the 1 or 2 days at home where they're comfortable, they can do whatever, still being efficient. Because I don't think, I find in general we have been quite efficient. Um, but some sort of combination that allows people to do a bit of both, I think.
Sure. Thanks so much for that, Enrique. That's very kind of you. What about anybody else? What else is going on out there?
Yeah, Tim, I did have a question or comment or perhaps a discussion point. So, given your wealth of experience of coaching leaders and leadership coaching, how imperative do you think it is that people return to the office, based on the fact that those of us in leadership positions have learned to do that in a office-based environment? What's your view on how well leadership can be taught in a virtual environment?
Well, so you make a really good point about the fact that leaders we have learned to be leaders in a world of where we are present and we can see one another face to face. That said, I think leaders have adapted reasonably well to leading in a virtual world. There were lots of examples at the beginning of lockdown where people kind of got it a bit wrong. I mean, just like from a small tactical level where people were insisting that for internal meetings you still wore a jacket and tie, and I think really on Zoom calls, it's like they're at home and they're playing with their kids 1 minute and they're coming onto a Zoom call the next minute. So little things like that. There was also someone early on who insisted that they had a team catch up at 5:30 every evening. The intention was that they were to just check in with everybody at the end of the day. Hey, how are you? Have you had an all right day? It was received as, you don't believe we're going to work till 5:30, and so therefore you're checking up on us and putting a meeting in at 5:30. Why do that? So apart from a couple of minor glitches at the beginning, I think actually we've adapted to this remarkably well. To Enrique's point, if we study habit change, we reckon it takes around about a normal human about 3 months to change a habit. Because you've got to practice it, and there's something about a 3-month point, which is a bit of a magic moment. Maybe it's 4, but thereabouts. We've been doing this by the 21st of June. We've been doing this for 15 months. That is long enough to create new habits, new neural pathways, new ways of working. And I don't think people are going to be willing to, as Enrique said, to give up their newfound freedoms particularly easily. So we have to find a way of managing it. What does it mean for leadership? I think it means that leaders have to be, well, maybe even more able to adapt themselves. I know one of the things that I've missed hugely, and I was saying this to my team, was, yeah, I wanted to see people face to face. I enjoy brainstorming stuff. I enjoy putting things up on a whiteboard and kicking ideas around, and we get a lot done doing that. So I've really missed that. So I think we have to do that still. But equally, we have to recognise that people have had a change of way of working. One of the things that someone said to me, maybe in sort of month 3, they said there are 2 things that they've learned about themselves and about their people, and they said there were trust and pride. I thought, okay. I said, so tell me a bit more about that. He said, I've learned that I need to trust my people more. He said, I always trusted my people. I've never sort of not trusted my people, because that's, you know, quite a bad thing. But what I've realized now is just how much I can trust them, and how much I ought to always have been giving them tasks that I've always traditionally held on to for myself. So for him, it was a real light bulb moment that actually the team are really good, and if I just give them a little space, they will absolutely thrive. And so he said, his trust level has just increased enormously. And the second thing was pride. And he said he beams with pride when a client comes back to him and says, oh, do you know that piece of work that person did for me? Absolutely brilliant, absolutely top notch. And he goes, wow. I said, I'm just so, because traditionally he would have done it, or at least maybe, which is possibly a bad thing, but maybe put his name on the top of it. But nonetheless, coming back to him, people are coming back to him saying it was brilliant. So he's this whole idea of trust people, and then you will be enormously proud of what it is they do. And I think people have learned that. So we can't lose it. We can't lose that. But Alex, I think I'm not sure whether or not I've answered your question there, but I think there's lots and lots of stuff that we've learned over the last 12 months.
I agree. I think you've answered the question. I think I guess a point for us to all think about is, as we develop the next generation of future leaders, how we do that virtually, or more often we're a mixture of virtually and in person, depending on how the world sort of plays out going forwards. But I think it'll be an interesting dynamic going forwards.
So in terms of the actual development of people, yes, you're right. I think that the development, there may well be still some face-to-face stuff, and I think that there is still a place for that, to develop a network amongst yourselves. But I also think that there's so much will be done online. I mean, the acceleration in the use of some of these online learning tools has been enormous. And so I think development going forward will absolutely be a mixture with heavy use of online activity. But people want to meet. That's the thing. People still want to meet. They don't want to be stuck behind a Zoom call doing more learning courses than they have to. They want some of this stuff they need to do face to face. So, look, anybody, what else? Some other people. What are some of the other things that you're worried about, concerned about in terms of bringing people back into the office? Anything else going on out there? Or has anyone got an interesting model of hybrid working that they think might be useful to share?
Tim, hi, it's Tim Sheffield here.
Hi, Tim.
Just want to ask you a question. Do you think that management teams and organizations will have to reinvent themselves, and the traditional models of management structure will change going forward?
So I don't, the word reinvent, that's an interesting word to use. I think come the 24th, or maybe even before the 21st of June, there's going to need to be leadership teams thinking long and hard about reconnecting themselves. So let's not as part of reinvention, but I think re before any word is going to be really important in the run up to the 21st, and indeed beyond, over the next 6 months of the year, right up to Christmas. And what I mean by that is people have been detached for by 21st June 15 months. There'll have been new joiners, some of whom will have never have met in person the teams that they work with. There'll be a need to reconnect with one another, realign ourselves with our strategy, just to remind ourselves, what are we here for again? Why are we here? And this is not just leadership teams, it's sort of any teams across organizations. So realign ourselves behind our core purpose, and reconnect. Anything that starts with really, but because I think it's resetting. It's really about resetting ourselves. Now, whether or not you choose to reinvent yourself, to the reason I say that I think it's a moment that matters is I think coming back post-COVID is an opportunity for organizations to realign or reassess. And the result of a reassessment might be, no, we're absolutely going in the right direction. Where we were going before, it's absolutely the right way. And what we just need to do is remind people about the bus that they're on, the journey that this is going to, the destination this bus is going to. Let's extend the bus analogy. What are the rules as we operate on the bus? What's the destination? Who's driving it? How fast is the bus going? All those sorts of things. It's an opportunity to realign people with those things. I do think it's an opportunity, though, if one wishes to reinvent ourselves. And I think there are moments in time that are great to grab hold of and do something with. And I think this is one of them. Yeah, I think it's really important to do something with it. Otherwise, that's the other thing. We might miss the opportunity, which would be such a shame to miss this opportunity to reconnect. I've mentioned in the past about the idea of social glue. I think there's something that joins us all together in teams that is beyond the wire diagram. It's some sort of intangible thing, and I describe it as social glue. And social glue just doesn't happen by accident. You've got to work on developing social glue and work on the relationships between people. And going into COVID, the team that went into COVID probably had a reasonable amount of social glue, certainly if team leaders had worked on connecting their teams. But that glue has disappeared. It's got loose, or there's a lot of tension has happened. People have either done big activities during COVID. I've been working with a firm that's gone through an acquisition, and also a big headcount exercise all during COVID. And tensions are tight, and glue is missing, and so they need to do some work on creating new glue that joins people together, create new bits of mutual understanding. I hope that might answer your question, Tim. There's so much. I really do think that this is a moment that matters for people.
Thanks.
What else? Anybody else out there that either has a question or some reflection on how they're bringing people back into the world of work?
So it's Alex again. I think just a comment from me. It's interesting when you look at the press. I guess the financial services press or the financial services company has been the most vocal in terms of what they're doing in terms of people returning, be it Goldman Sachs through to JP Morgan, Houlihan Lokey. Do you think there's an understanding in the market that that we have to just find our feet as to what works going forwards, that we're going to make mistakes, that we're not going to get this right, that management teams are probably going to get this wrong because this is uncharted territory for most people? I think it was in the press today that obviously some banks coming in 20%, some banks are saying that we need to just send everybody back and see what happens, sort of from that, which that doesn't necessarily probably sort of sound so sensible either, and undoubtedly they'll make some mistakes in doing that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. In the same way as when we left, we went in March last year, and we went into this new world that people were making all sorts of assumptions and what have you. We just kind of had to see what it's like. I do think for those firms that are saying, and there are a number of financial services firms, as well as other big oil companies, for example, that I'm aware of, that are saying everybody back. As soon as we can get everybody back, they're all back, nothing's changed, move on. Yeah. I think that's the wrong thing to say, because I think that they're just saying la la la. Our fingers are in our ears and we've learned nothing. But I think, yeah, it would be really interesting. In fact, I was chatting with someone the other day. We not only need to bring people back around the 21st of June, but we also need to be thinking about it around the 21st of December and learn what's happened in the last 6 months. How has it worked? And do we need to reset ourselves subtly again for the year 2022. So I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think we are going to make mistakes, and we're just going to have to experiment a little bit and be open to that experimentation. Importantly, go on, Ian. You've got your hand up there, please.
Yeah, Tim. So thanks. This is great. So I used to run business banking at Barclays. So I'll throw a perception on financial services and tell what they're worrying about at the moment. And I'd be interested in your perspective on this. Two big debates. One is, what level of empowerment do you give leaders? So if you do choose to have, if you don't choose to have a, we want everybody back policy, that means that you have to create a policy or basically empower leaders at some level to make that decision for their teams. And there's a real nervousness about that, despite the comment that was made earlier about trust and pride. The risk of having two sort of side-by-side teams with very different working practices is viewed as a big concern. The second, I think, big concern is the question on running versus transform, and a view that we kind of got away with this because no one could really do. I mean, there are great examples of companies that have done acquisitions and so on, but pretty much everyone's just been head down running right now. What's the next problem we got to solve? What's the next problem we've got to solve? And now, it's going to be new business. It's going to be growth. It's going to be transformation. It's going to be cultural change. And there's a lot of nervousness about how do you actually do that over Zoom. We've proved you can run a business over Zoom, even through crisis mode. Can you transform it? Can you change its culture? And certainly somebody I was speaking to was a senior in a bank, was very concerned at the risk of a two-tier culture evolving, where rather than job function, that the organization split its sort of work from home or come into the office strategy based on ambition.
Yeah,
so you didn't want to end up with all the people who wanted to be present, all the youngsters who were trying to learn from the seniors, and they were all in the office. And if you like, your B- players and below were the ones who were at home. Yeah, and I think are we going to split based on our function and our personalities, or are we going to split based on our ambition? That's a worry.
Ian, those are really, really interesting points, and I want to address. I want to talk to both of those because you brought up some really, really good points. I would also like to say to everybody who is joined in to today's session, thank you. I'm conscious that some of you may need to drop off for various meetings, and that's fine. But I'm going to keep this conversation going. So anybody who wants to, please do feel free to stick around because I'm going to continue taking questions if that's all right. To anyone that is going to drop off, feel free, please keep joining us on the sessions during the week, and I very much look forward to seeing you at all our sessions throughout the week. You can find the information on the link that Fran sent or on our website, again, which is through the link, and so I look forward to seeing you. Ian, let me just come back to that point because I think you make a really, really interesting point. The point around empowerment. So yeah, so last week I was working with a senior management team around and we were talking about how do we make sure that we empower our people effectively, and more importantly, what does that actually mean? Because I think the word empowerment is used way too loosely, and some people think that it means just give me some stuff and let me crack on with it and don't bother me with it. But actually, I think there's something much more subtle about the art of empowerment. They were talking about, though, having come from an environment over the last 12 months where there's had to be quite a lot of control, and we need to start to move towards a degree of coaching and a degree of freedom. The controls come about because people have been nervous about handing stuff over, exactly to your point. It's lovely when you do get that leader that I mentioned earlier that suddenly trusts and is full of pride from the people that they've been working with. But nonetheless, people are nervous to hand things over, particularly in a controlled, and I use the word control in a regulated environment, in controlled environments, in controlled situations where there are significant consequences. And I think banks and financial services institutions have really struggled with some of the regulatory aspects of having traders working from their bedroom or whatever it might be. But I do think, though, I am a supporter of this whole notion of empowerment. However, to do it properly, first of all, the individuals providing empowerment, or the individual sort of saying, go and here's what I want you to get on with, need to understand what they're actually empowering people with and how to control it. And secondly, the individuals being empowered need to understand what that means, because this isn't empowerment with no boundaries. There are boundaries, and I think what we're going to need to do going forward is to make those boundaries really clear. I think Alex mentioned earlier on what are some of the lessons again for leaders, and I think one of them is about clarity of boundaries. What exactly can I do and what can't I do? What do I need to escalate and what can I hold on to for myself? And I think clarity, communication all the time. It's just about making sure we're clear, because if we're going to go into this hybrid model, we need to be clear. There is, of course, this big danger in a hybrid model. I was party to it myself the other day, where those that were in the room benefited from the small talk that happens after a meeting. Those people on the call, they're gone, and they didn't benefit from those chats. So there is a danger of creating this environment where there are those that have and have not, or are in or are not in. We did joke quite a lot in the army about never missing a meeting, because if you miss a meeting, you get spammed with a difficult or the horrible task that no one else wants to do. So you make sure that you are in every meeting. The run versus transform piece, yeah, I think that's difficult. And I think, so where I've seen businesses do quite transformational deals that were already on the table pre-COVID, but continued to execute against them during COVID, they've been really successful in a lot of the technical elements of a transformation, but they've really struggled with the cultural elements of transformation. And I believe it's the cultural elements that make it or break it. And so I know this one particular organization that I'm thinking of are putting a huge amount of work over the next 6 months in the come back to work piece. Yeah, the comeback, they're bringing everybody back, and they're going to be running, they're going to be offering to all teams across the organization a sort of off-the-shelf package which helps them to think about getting their team together. They're going to free up some budget to make sure that their teams can get together and connect with one another. And those gatherings are an opportunity not only to reconnect the team, but to make sure that the corporate message from on high is there, and they understood what's happened with transformation. But I think you make a really good point. I think that once everyone is back into some sort of running, there probably is going to be a huge amount of transformation going on, because people who didn't have something running beforehand will have been sitting on their hands going, we need to do something when we come out, whatever that looks like, be it a big headcount change, be it a big operational shift, systems shifts, or mergers, acquisitions, whatever it might be. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of that coming down the pipeline, and we're going to need to think about how we do that in a remote world. But we can only tap into the lessons that we've learned during this, and I think it probably leaders ought to sit down and reflect on what are some of the lessons that we've learned in this process, and how do we make sure that we keep everything good that we've learned, and we make sure we don't fall into any traps that might come along. And it was a great point, and there's a lot in there to unpack. So yeah, big challenges ahead, I think. Thank you for your question. Is that all right? Did I tap into enough there?
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you.
Good. There's loads more there, I think. Anybody else though?
The other thing I would just throw in there, which I was really interesting, was I was talking to a business in Birmingham who said, we think that too many businesses who are based in London are sweating about logistics and so on. And if you're outside of London, you know, it's 10 times easier to commute into Birmingham than it is to commute into London. Yeah. 10 times cheaper. So a lot of those barriers to coming back in the office are somewhat capital centric.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. We are probably guilty of being London focused in our thinking. I think you're absolutely right. Anything else from anybody that you'd like to chat about or share? Good. Okay. Well, look, that's been a really, really interesting and I really enjoyed that discussion with you all. Thank you very much indeed for the time. Like I said to Ian there, that there is so much to discuss in this space, and I really hope that firms take the opportunity to grasp this moment that matters, because I think it does, and do something with it, and make sure that their people not only come back safely, but take the opportunity to reevaluate. We've used the re-word a lot. Reevaluate perhaps how they work, why they work, and what can be used in the future. So we've got loads of sessions, like I said, this week. Please feel free to join them. Please share it with other people, because we've got lots and lots to talk about. And follow us on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with anybody out there on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to do so. And let's stay in touch. Let's keep the conversation going. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. And I hope you have a really good afternoon. Thanks, everybody.